Welcome, Mystic Seekers, to Mystic Manor, where history meets mystery. Santa Claus, a symbol of joy, generosity, and warmth. But what if I told you that this beloved figure has a much darker past? Before he became the jolly old man in red, Santa was known for giving rewards and for being feared and punishing, a presence that could just as easily bring you joy or something far darker. For centuries, Santa's companions weren't elves or reindeer, but shadowy figures who stood beside him, each with their own way of ensuring children stayed in line. But over time, their roles were quietly replaced, leaving behind only the cheerful giver we know today. The evolution of Santa is a story of mystical folklore, cultural shifts, and even commercial power. So prepare yourself, because here comes the real Santa Claus, and his story isn't as heartwarming as you've been led to believe. To understand Santa Claus as we know him today, we must first travel back, far, far back, to a time of the age of gods, warriors, and an All-Father who wandered the 9 realms. This is where our story begins. With Odin. The Wild Hunt is one of the most famous legends tied to Odin, the All-Father of Norse mythology. As the chief god of the Aesir, Odin is a master of wisdom, war, and magic. As the cold winter months set in, Norse people believed that Odin, accompanied by a procession of ghostly figures, would race across the night sky on his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. And the howling wind? That was believed to be the sound of the hunt. People stayed indoors, wary of being caught outside, because those who saw the wild hunt risked being dragged away by the spirits. In Norse belief, the wild hunt wasn't just a spectacle. It was an omen of misfortune or death. Some stories claimed that Odin would capture wandering souls to join his ghostly procession. You may be wondering, how does this connect to Santa Claus? Well, Odin riding through the sky on his horse is strikingly similar to Santa riding in a sleigh pulled by reindeer. Both figures are seen traveling across the sky during winter. Odin's physical appearance was often depicted as an old bearded man with a long cloak. Sometimes he wore a hood or a wide-brimmed hat, not unlike the pointed hats seen in early depictions of Father Christmas. He had a commanding presence, with one eye glowing with wisdom, as he had sacrificed his other eye for divine knowledge. This image of the wise old man is a powerful archetype that appears in many cultures. As a god of wisdom, Odin was said to be all-knowing, watching over humanity. In Norse mythology, Odin had 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, meaning thought and memory, who would fly across the world and report back to him. In some ways, they acted like informants, much like Santa keeping a list of children who have been good or bad. If you've ever left out cookies for Santa Claus, you're continuing a tradition that's been around for centuries. Only back then, it wasn't cookies and milk. It was straw or hay for Odin's horse, Sleipnir. Children in Norse cultures would leave this offering. In return, Odin might leave behind small gifts or trinkets. The parallels are hard to ignore. Both Odin and Santa are bearded, winter travelers with knowledge of who's been good and who's been bad. They both have animal companions, Odin's Sleipnir and Santa's reindeer. Children leave offerings for them and receive gifts in return. And most importantly, both figures are active during the winter season, particularly around Yule, which became the framework for what we now call Christmas. Our next part of this journey takes us back to the 4th century, to the ancient city of Myra, in what is now modern-day Turkey. Here, Saint Nicholas was born. His story begins as a deeply devout man, dedicated to helping others, especially those in need. As the Bishop of Myra, Saint Nicholas was renowned for his good deeds and charitable acts. One of his most famous legends tells of him secretly providing dowries for 3 poor sisters, saving them from a life of hardship. The story starts with a poor man who had 3 daughters that were unable to marry because their father couldn't afford their dowries. At that time, dowries were essential for marriage, and women without one faced limited options, often falling into poverty or servitude. To prevent this fate, Saint Nicholas secretly provided each daughter with a dowry. The most famous version says that on 3 separate nights, he threw a bag of gold coins through the family's window or chimney. This story solidified Nicholas's reputation as a benevolent, selfless giver and linked him to the custom of secret gift-giving that eventually evolved into Santa Claus's role. Another tale recounts his miraculous intervention to save sailors caught in a dangerous storm, earning him the title of Protector of Sailors. According to legend, a group of sailors was caught in a fierce storm while traveling across the sea. Facing imminent shipwreck, the sailors prayed to Saint Nicholas for help, invoking his protection and begging for divine intervention. Suddenly, Saint Nicholas appeared on the ship or was seen from afar on the shore. He rebuked the winds and calmed the sea, allowing the sailors to reach land safely. Some versions say the sailors later visited Myra to thank Nicholas and told others of his miraculous deed, which further ingrained his reputation as a patron saint of sailors. Coastal communities across Italy, Greece, and other Mediterranean regions built shrines in his honor. To this day, Saint Nicholas is venerated as the patron saint of sailors, and his feast day, December 6th, is celebrated in maritime communities with prayers for safety at sea. Saint Nicholas's influence didn't end with his life in 4th century Myra. Instead, his legacy evolved, crossing borders, adapting to new cultures, and eventually becoming one of the most iconic figures in Dutch folklore. So how did Saint Nicholas, a 4th century Greek bishop from Myra, become a Dutch cultural icon? The answer lies in the migration of his cult following. By the Middle Ages, Saint Nicholas had become one of the most widely venerated saints in Europe, particularly in Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands. His feast day, celebrated on December 6th, became a major holiday. But it was in the Netherlands where his image underwent a dramatic transformation. As Dutch society embraced Saint Nicholas, they adapted him to suit their local customs. But unlike the quiet, kind Bishop of Myra, the Dutch version of Saint Nicholas, now called Sinterklaas, took on a dual role as both a benevolent gift giver and a moral enforcer. His role was clear: reward the good and punish the bad. Sinterklaas's role was closer to that of a judge of morality. Children who displayed virtues like obedience, respect, and generosity would be rewarded with gifts and sweets. Those who were disobedient, disrespectful, or lazy were at risk of receiving something far less appealing: a lump of coal, a switch, a bundle of sticks. In earlier versions of the Sinterklaas story, Sinterklaas himself could be seen as a strict, all-seeing judge of children's behavior, much like the all-knowing Santa Claus concept that later developed in America. Over in the Netherlands, the arrival of Sinterklaas is a grand event. Sinterklaas arrives by steamboat from Spain in mid-November, an odd but unique addition to the tale. As he disembarks, he is met with crowds of cheering children. From there, he rides a majestic white horse named Amerigo through the streets. In the days leading up to Sinterklaasavond, Sinterklaas Eve, on December 5th, children place their shoes by the fireplace with hopes that Sinterklaas will fill them with treats like candy, chocolate coins, marzipan, and small toys. But it's also a moment of reflection for children, as they are reminded that Sinterklaas is watching their behavior. Unlike Santa Claus, who visits homes unseen, Sinterklaas is a visible public figure. His arrival is marked by parades, processions, and public celebrations. But the underlying message remains clear. Good behavior is rewarded, and bad behavior is punished. If you're starting to see the similarities between Sinterklaas and Santa Claus, you're not alone. The Dutch version of Saint Nicholas would later become a template for the Santa Claus known in the United States. Originating in the Alpine regions, Krampus is believed to be a remnant of pre-Christian winter traditions. He shares similarities with wild man figures from Germanic folklore, and his horns, hooves, and beastly face suggest possible links to figures like Pan, Perchta, and other fertility spirits. The name Krampus originates from the German word Krampen, which means claw. When Christianity took hold, Krampus was reimagined as the shadowy companion of Saint Nicholas, serving as a warning of punishment for naughty children. While Saint Nicholas rewarded the good, Krampus ensured the wicked faced consequences. He didn't hand out lumps of coal. No, Krampus carried something far more menacing: birch switches to use on misbehaving children, chains to capture them, and, in some versions of the tale, a large sack or basket where he'd stuff naughty children to drag them to his lair. That's right. If you were especially bad, it wasn't just a scolding you'd receive. You might be taken away, never to be seen again. In many 19th century depictions, Krampus was illustrated dragging away terrified children. In some versions of the story, he merely punished them, but in others, he took them to the underworld. For centuries, children in alpine villages knew that the sound of rattling chains wasn't just the cold wind. It was a warning. If you didn't behave, Saint Nicholas wouldn't be the one to visit you that night. Krampus would. The legend of Belsnickel has roots in Germanic folk tradition, but gained new life in the 1700s, when German immigrants brought him to the American colonies, particularly to Pennsylvania. The name Belsnickel comes from Belsen, to whip, and nickel, a nickname for Saint Nicholas. His role was to judge children's behavior before Christmas, offering treats to the good and punishment to the naughty. For children, the sight of Belsnickel at the door was a test of their conscience. Were you good this year? If so, you might receive a treat from his bag. But if you had been disobedient, you'd face the sting of his switches. And unlike Santa, Belsnickel didn't rely on letters or wish lists to decide your fate. He judged you right there on the spot. In some households, Belsnickel would appear unannounced, often days before Christmas. He'd question children directly. Have you behaved this year? Depending on their answer and how convincing it was, He would either reward them with candy or tap their hands with his switch as a reminder to do better. It was a moment of suspense that left a lasting impression on young minds. If you think Krampus is scary, there's another Christmas time enforcer, and in many ways, far more terrifying. Her name, Frau Perchta. Some know her as the Christmas witch, but that barely scratches the surface. Unlike Krampus, who comes to punish children, judgment falls on everyone. Perchta's origins trace back to pre-Christian Alpine regions, where she was revered as a goddess tied to nature, the harvest, and winter. Her name derives from the Old High German word Berchten, meaning bright or shining. When Christianity spread through Europe, many pagan deities were reimagined or demonized. Perchta was no exception. She can take on different forms, including both a beautiful young woman and an old hag. In some tales, she is described as a beautiful woman clad in white, glowing with an ethereal light. In other stories, she appears as a hideous old crone with wild hair and a goose foot, a symbol of her shape-shifting abilities and her connection to animals and nature. The goosefoot links her to spinning and weaving. Women were expected to finish all their spinning by the end of the year, and Perchta would inspect their work. If it was done well, she would reward them with small gifts. If it was unfinished or poorly done, however, the punishment was far more severe. During the 12 days of Christmas, she would visit homes to inspect the household's behavior. Those who worked hard and followed traditions could expect coins or small gifts left behind. But for the lazy or disobedient, Perchta's punishment was horrifying. She is known as the belly slitter and would open their bellies, remove their organs, and replace them with straw and shards of glass. Her role is closely tied to the 12 days of Christmas, a time of feasting, rest, and reflection between December 25th and January 6th. During this time, she would roam the countryside, accompanied by her entourage of strange and mystical beings known as the Perchten. The Perchten were divided into two groups, the Schönperchten, or beautiful Perchten, and the Schiachperchten, or ugly Perchten. The Schönperchten brought blessings and good fortune, while the Schiachperchten were harbingers of fear and punishment. Today, Perchta's legend continues to thrive. Her story has become intertwined with local Christmas and New Year's traditions. Festivals like the Perchtenlauf feature participants dressing as her followers, donning masks and costumes to reenact her journey through the countryside. During the Reformation, Martin Luther wanted to distance Protestant Christmas traditions from Catholic customs, like the feast of Saint Nicholas or Sinterklaas. Instead of focusing on Saint Nicholas as a gift giver, Luther promoted the idea that the Christ child, Christkind, was the one bringing gifts. By shifting the gift bringer from a saint to the Christ child, Luther aimed to recenter the religious focus of Christmas around Jesus. In many modern depictions, Christkind appears as an angelic, fairy-like child, or even a golden-haired girl wearing a white gown, often with a golden crown, and sometimes angel wings. Christkind often enters homes secretly, sometimes unseen, and leaves gifts for children, similar to the way Santa operates. When German immigrants brought the tradition of Christkind to America, English speakers mispronounced and misinterpreted Christkind as Kris Kringle. The 1947 movie Miracle on 34th Street played a key role in this transformation. In the movie, Kris Kringle is the name of the man who claims to be Santa Claus. Kris Kringle became synonymous with the Santa Claus figure, merging with the Dutch tradition of Sinterklaas, which is where the Santa Claus name comes from. Long before Santa Claus made his grand entrance into chimneys, England had its own iconic winter figure, Father Christmas. Unlike the modern version we know today, early Father Christmas was not a bringer of gifts. Instead, he embodied something much more special, the very spirit of celebration, feasting, and midwinter merriment. Father Christmas was a symbolic figure of abundance and good cheer, calling people to the table. The heart of his role was to encourage feasting, drinking, and revelry during the long, cold winter months. His presence was meant to lift the spirits of a weary community, gathering people together for warmth, food, and companionship. This image of Father Christmas as a jolly old man with a long flowing beard should feel familiar. His robes were often green, red, or white, representing the colors of winter and the natural world. But as time passed, so did his role. By the 17th century, the Protestant Reformation changed everything. New Protestant values discouraged excessive feasting and celebration, as many religious leaders saw it as pagan behavior. Father Christmas, once the face of revelry, suddenly had to clean up his act. No longer was he the wild spirit of drinking and dining. His new role became more focused on family, virtue, and good behavior. This shift was critical in his transformation from a figure of merriment to one with elements of gift-giving and moral judgment. This evolution wasn't unique to England. Across Europe, many wintertime figures were going through similar changes. Saint Nicholas, who had long been known for his generosity and care for children, began to merge with the image of Father Christmas. By the time the two figures combined, they became one larger-than-life figure, a bearded old man, wise yet kind, who encouraged virtue, generosity, and warmth. The fusion of Father Christmas and Saint Nicholas was solidified in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially after the English influence spread to America. Once across the Atlantic, Father Christmas's transformation reached its final stage. Dutch settlers brought the figure of Sinterklaas to New Amsterdam, modern-day New York City, in the 17th century. Over time, English-speaking colonists mispronounced Sinterklaas as Santa Claus. By blending Father Christmas, Saint Nicholas, and Sinterklaas into one, the image of Santa Claus was born. While his original green robes have now shifted to red, his message remains the same: to bring light, warmth, and generosity to the darkest days of the year. One of the key figures in reshaping Santa Claus was Clement Clark Moore, an American professor, theologian, and poet. In 1823, Moore penned a poem that would forever alter the perception of Santa Claus. Titled A Visit from Saint Nicholas, this poem, better known today as The Night Before Christmas, introduced readers to a new, lighter side of Santa Claus. Moore's poem portrayed Santa as a whimsical and magical figure. He was no longer the intimidating figure that would visit to punish misbehaving children. Instead, he became a jolly, kind-hearted man who traveled in a sleigh pulled by reindeer, bringing gifts to well-behaved children around the world. But the transformation of Santa Claus was not solely the work of Moore. The artistic contributions of Thomas Nast, a 19th century political cartoonist, played a crucial role in cementing this softer, family-friendly image of Santa. Through the pages of Harper's Weekly in the 1860s, Nast drew a version of Santa that would become the blueprint for everything we now recognize about him. In Nast's illustrations, Santa became more than just a magical gift bringer. He became a figure of Christmas wonder and family unity. Nast's artwork also helped to establish Santa's appearance with the familiar red coat trimmed with white fur. As Moore's poem and Nast's illustrations spread across the Western world, Santa Claus began to lose the darker associations tied to his origins. By the late 19th century, Santa had become a symbol of the holiday season, a man who brought smiles, laughter, and presents to children everywhere. In 1931, a pivotal moment in the history of Santa Claus occurred when Coca-Cola launched an advertising campaign that would forever change how we perceive this iconic figure. The Coca-Cola campaign was led by the brilliant artist Haddon Sundblom, who began painting Santa Claus for the company's holiday advertisements. Sundblom's Santa, first featured in 1931, was depicted as a plump, rosy-cheeked, cheerful man, dressed in his now iconic red suit with white fur trim. This portrayal perfectly aligned with Coca-Cola's goal to associate its product with the cheerful spirit of the season. His depiction in the Coca-Cola ads was a masterstroke, highlighting a man who was approachable, kind, and full of merriment, an embodiment of holiday cheer that would resonate deeply with the public. As Krampus, Belsnickel, and similar figures fell out of popular tradition, their roles became less relevant in a society where Christmas began to focus more on family values, commercial cheer, and material gifts. Over the decades, this Santa Claus has remained a central figure in the celebration of Christmas. From beginnings of selling a drink with a controversial ingredient to shaping the face of Christmas cheer, Coca-Cola's influence goes far beyond just soda. It defined the modern Santa. This cultural shift reshaped Santa Claus into the figure we know today. A magical, cheerful man who brings joy and gifts to children around the world. While Krampus and other fearsome figures have faded in the mainstream, they still continue to be celebrated in certain cultures. And of course, the modern-day Santa wouldn't be complete without Mrs. Claus. While Santa's partner might seem like she's been around forever, she's actually a relatively new addition to the Santa legend. The first mention of Mrs. Claus appeared in an 1849 short story by James Reese called A Christmas Legend. In the tale, she's portrayed as a gentle helper, reflecting the Victorian ideal of a wife. At the time, she was presented as a quiet, supportive figure. But over time, her role grew. By the 20th century, she became more than just Santa's wife. She became a figure in her own right, seen as the heart of the North Pole. Some say she oversees the elves, and others believe she keeps Santa on schedule. And without her, it's hard to imagine Christmas being quite so cheerful. But what about his noble companion, Rudolph? While Santa's original reindeer Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and the rest were introduced in A Visit from Saint Nicholas, Rudolph didn't join the family until 1939. He was created by a man named Robert L. May, a copywriter working for the Montgomery Ward department store. The goal? Write a heartwarming Christmas story that could be given away to children as a promotional gift. What May came up with was the tale of an underdog, or perhaps an under-reindeer, who was different from all the others. A reindeer with a glowing red nose, mocked by his peers, but ultimately saving Christmas with his unique gift. His story resonated with audiences, especially during the harsh years of the Great Depression. The story was a success, and Montgomery Ward handed out over 2.4 million copies in 1939. While the storybook had regional popularity, it was the 1949 song, written by Robert L. May's brother-in-law, Johnny Marks, that launched Rudolph to national and international fame. It sold over 2 million copies that year and went on to become one of the best-selling Christmas songs of all time. Rudolph was an invention of the 20th century's commercial world. Just like Coca-Cola's Santa, he became a permanent part of Christmas folklore. Today, we celebrate Santa as a figure of joy and generosity, but his story is a reminder that even the most beloved characters can come from darker places. So, the next time you see Santa Claus, take a moment to think about how far he's come and the legends that helped shape him into the icon we know and love today. So, hang your stockings and get ready for the night, because he knows if you've been naughty or nice, so he might just pay you a visit if you've been good this year. Thank you for joining me for this festive story. Until next time, stay mystical. If you've made it this far, you're officially on the nice list, so go ahead and leave a like. And I have some exciting news. I just launched channel memberships as a celebration of hitting 10,000 subscribers. If you'd like to join the Mystic Seekers, you'll get exclusive early access to new videos before anyone else. Take a look behind the scenes and members-only community posts, and so much more. So if you want to help support the channel, go and check it out. And for today's question, who's your favorite Santa Claus in any movie or TV show? Is it the classic Kringle from Miracle on 34th Street, Tim Allen from the Santa Claus, or maybe someone else entirely? Drop it in the comments. I can't wait to see your answers. Thank you so much for being part of this journey with me. I hope the holiday spirit stays with you always. Thanks for watching.